Right. Peace. So I was doing some work today and I had some thoughts that I just wanted to share with those of you who are tuning in regards to our life journey and some of the things to consider along that journey in life. Those who are of the 5%, one of the things that is a part of our cultural curriculum is, in addition to our supreme mathematics and our supreme alphabet, we also study 120, which is 120 degrees or 120 lessons. One of the lessons that we learn in our actual facts is that Mount Everest is 29,141 feet high. And a lot of times, people may not know what to actually do with that degree. So today I just wanted to build on Mount Everest as well as the importance of our ability to move mountains. I think one of the first things that's important to understand is the difference between a mountain and a hill is hills are typically man-made. They're man-made elevations of land. A mountain may not necessarily be man-made. There are other different natural factors that can raise mountains. And one of the other things about mountains is mountains by nature grow in a straight line. So when you see a mountain, there are always other mountains that are present because they naturally grow in a straight line. So even when we talk about Mount Everest being 29,141 feet high, there are other mountains that are right beside Mount Everest. People typically don't pay attention to them because they're usually in awe of the height of Mount Everest, which is about 5.5 miles high. But again, mountains naturally grow in a straight line. That is to say, any mountain that we see in our life or any process that we're going through that requires a level of elevation, it's not a singular thing. It's a part of a medley or a succession of elevation. The same way if you were to strive to be a mountain climber, it's not like you're going to get to flat land and then there's just one mountain that you have to climb. There's a series of mountains that you're going to have to climb because mountains, again, by nature, grow in a straight line. So if you see one aspect of life which requires elevation, there's going to be other aspects of life that also require elevation, as well as descent. And that is the nature of that process of growth and development, that it's not singular, that it's a succession of elevation. So one of the things that we say is we strive to always elevate, or we're striving for perfection. That's not a destination that plateaus somewhere. It's a constant process of growth and development. A journey that we may start at one particular point, but it's a line of growth and development that we go through in terms of elevation. So now when you think about mountain climbing itself, when you're striving to climb a mountain such as Mount Everest, It requires strategy. It requires specific materials. And it requires a process along with that strategy. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, if you're going to climb Mount Everest, there are certain resources and tools that you need to take with you. There are other resources and tools that will only weigh you down, that is not necessary for you to bring along that journey. It's the exact same thing in life. If we have a determined idea of reaching a certain goal, being successful in certain undertakings, there are certain resources, there's certain tools that are required in order to arrive there. And there are certain things that we should not be taking along with us because it's only going to weigh us down. So Mount Everest being 29,141 feet high, it's a process and a journey that requires strategy. So for example, when you're striving to elevate something of that height, there are certain points along that journey that you have to stop and acclimate yourself to the environment at that particular level of elevation. Because as you ascend, the atmosphere changes, the temperature changes, the terrain changes. And you have to get to a point along that journey where you're able to camp out for a minute. Peace. And you're able to acclimate yourself to that environment temporarily in order for you to press on further. So if you're looking at people who climb places like Mount Vesuvius or Mount Everest or Mount Kilimanjaro, there are certain points along that journey where they have camps. And usually you're in camp a minimum of 3 days in order for your body to acclimate itself to the atmospheric pressure, the environment, and the terrain. It is only until you've acclimated yourself that you can actually press on further. You don't just start climbing a mountain and just keep going. No, you have to, it takes time. So you may climb a certain 100 feet or a few hundred feet, and then you camp out for a few days. You acclimate yourself to that environment or that particular level of that journey, and then you're able to hike another distance, and then you camp out again. So you have those particular demarcated points along that journey that allows you to acclimate yourself to that process of elevation. Life is the exact same way. When we're striving to make dietary changes, or we're striving to make changes from a sedentary lifestyle that we may have acclimated ourselves to, and now we want to be more active or incorporate more exercise, you don't just jump from one place to the next. It's best to do it in steps, because now you have to acclimate yourself. Because if you don't follow that process and those steps, just like if you're striving to climb a mountain, the results may be disastrous because your body's not acclimated to that environment nor the terrain in order for you to press further. Many people have died because they didn't acclimate themselves to a certain level of elevation. True indeed. So if you're making dietary changes, there are certain things that you need to incorporate slowly in order to acclimate yourself to this new change of your diet. If you're striving to incorporate exercise and stuff, you don't just run out here and run a marathon. That can be disastrous for you. You have to build your way up in order to acclimate yourself to that conditioning in order for you to actually achieve that goal. That is the proper way to do it. It's the same way when you're elevating in terms of other different areas of life that you're striving to grow and develop in. You do it in stages. So elevation requires acclimation. Elevation requires acclimation. If you have certain type of goals or things that you want to do professionally, you will always get to a particular point in your journey in terms of striving to elevate professionally, where now you're going to have to take stock because you've reached a precipice along that journey. So what's a precipice? A precipice is a steep cliff. It's like an escarpment. So anytime you're striving to elevate, you get to a particular point where now you're seeing the height of where you actually are. And some people are fearful of that because they're afraid of heights. I've seen it all of the time. I've seen people who say stuff like, yeah, they want to be effective public speakers. But when the opportunity presents itself to them and they have to be prepared to give a speech in front of 250, 300 people, now a lot of excuses come up. Now they got these weird type of beliefs and connections to, I don't want to wear a suit. Or it's difficult for them to put down the weed. Or they got all of these other different reasons why they're not able to take advantage of this opportunity right now. Because sometimes for people, the fear of success is greater than their fear of failure. Because they're so comfortable with being in a certain place in life and acclimated to a certain place in life that the elevation above that is fearful of them. Just like people that climb Mount Everest. You only have a select few people who've literally climbed Mount Everest, who've reached the peak. But you have a lot of people who've reached certain camps along Mount Everest, but have never elevated beyond that. And that's fine. They did what they were capable and comfortable with doing. But if you really have a goal in terms of elevation and not putting a limit on where you want to go in life, then you have to be able to overcome fear when it comes to reaching certain precipices along that journey. When you get to those steep cliffs and you look over, you have to be able to press on further. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but that is a part of life processes. And these precipices, or these different opportunities to elevate, begin when we're incarnated consciousness in this form, when we're physically born. My 3-year-old daughter just experienced one recently last month, because at the end of the school year, we had a talent show for our elementary school, and I signed me and my 3-year-old up to do a dance battle, and she's dancing all of the time. If I turned on music right now, she'd start dancing. So she loves dancing. And she's pretty comfortable just doing it in front of people. If we're down at the falls and there are people there playing music, she'd just get right out and start dancing. That's how comfortable she is. But when it came time to do this talent show, and there's an audience sitting there, and they put the breakdancing music on, and me and her go up on stage, she get up on stage, she look out in the audience, she look at me, and her ass walked right off that stage. And I'm like, yo, what's up? Like, you left me hanging like that. You know what I mean? But that was one of her first experiences with being on a precipice. With being in that journey of life where you reach those particular demarcated points, or those experiences in your journey where now you're confronted with the reality of showing and proving what it is that you have a certain proclivity for, or inclination for, or tendency to do. If you have a natural gift for creative arts, or being a musician, or athleticism, any of these different areas of life, you're always going to come to a point where you reach a precipice, where you're going to be challenged by life itself to see whether or not you're going to elevate beyond where you've been comfortable at. Now, I know some of y'all check me out and stuff, and you may think that I'm naturally a public speaker. I don't see myself as a natural public speaker. I've had to learn this and develop it and study it and practice in many different realms. in order for me to be more comfortable and confident speaking publicly. And because I took the initiative to do that, this journey, or this mountain in terms of Mount Everest, again, mountains grow naturally in straight lines. I had to go through various different processes where I'm constantly elevating and reaching precipices, where I had to challenge the reality of what it is that I'm saying that I desire to do. So speaking in a boardroom with 15 people around a table is different than speaking in front of 1,500 people. Building amongst people that agree with you once a month at a parliament or a rally is different than being able to translate this consciousness and these principles and values in a way that the average person are able to receive it. Whether they're 80 years old or whether they're 8 years old. That is the real challenge and the reality of living mathematics. If you're a staunch Democrat, it's cool to be able to talk about politics around other Democrats. Share those perspectives around some conservative Republicans. That is a precipice. That is a challenge in terms of your growth and development. If you really are in this sphere of striving to become a public official or a politician, you're always going to have those different experiences, and you have to be up to the task. One of the ways that you could be acclimated and comfortable and confident when those events come is to constantly be in the process of growth and development so that you're always ready and prepared. I've shared this example before, and some of you have never heard of it before, but at one particular point, I was interviewing various different celebrities or artists, and I had an opportunity to interview Dej Loaf. Now, Dej Loaf is a popular female hip hop artist that's out of Detroit. She was young at the time. I think she was probably around 20 or 21. So I was just asking her questions about her journey and her growth and development. And those of you who are not familiar with Dej Loaf, she, as a young woman, was pretty well known throughout Detroit in terms of putting out mixtapes and doing performances. She just didn't get her big break until Drake actually tweeted one of her lyrics that originated in a mixtape that was more of a local or regional thing. And from Drake's cosign, she immediately got over 100,000 followers. People are striving to find out who she is now. And now she gets all of these opportunities or doors opened up to her just based upon that instantaneous cosign by Drake. So now, because she was already acclimated to this and had already had a lot of experience in terms of her growth and development, she was prepared for those opportunities. She didn't make up a bunch of excuses why she shouldn't take advantage of those opportunities or she's not ready and all this other stuff. So from there, her career grew exponentially because she was already ready for that opportunity. You see it all of the time. When you look at social media, the internet today, it gives the illusion as if it shrinks the world, because now people are less than 6 degrees of separation. So at any particular time, you can have someone that reshares a video or contacts you about doing some graphic design or artwork, or wants to work with you musically over here, or they're striving to bring you in as a consultant on this particular project. That can happen instantaneously. The challenge is, are you ready for those type of opportunities when they present themselves to you? Because if you're ready, you ain't got to get ready. You know, my youngest brother is a music producer, and he's worked with a lot of different artists. Because he's younger than me, he's worked with a lot of younger artists like Trippie Redd and Gucci, Young Dolph, a lot of younger artists my brother has worked with. And one of the things that I've learned through him and from my own experience is These artists, they don't want to hear what one song you have. They want to hear a batch of production. They want to hear a catalog of what you have in your archives or in your chamber. Because you're stepping into a space that requires continuity. They ain't looking for no one-hit wonder stuff. They want to know what you're able to continuously produce. Are you built like that? And a lot of times people are not ready for that. One of my personal experiences is a few years ago when I was working with Samuel L. Jackson and his team with that Enslaved docuseries. Peace, I'm good, Knowledge Born. That was one of my experiences. And I've had many of those precipice moments in my life where I had to gather myself and be prepared for certain type of opportunities and not create excuses or reasons why I shouldn't take advantage of those type of opportunities. Whether that was being flown out across the country for a speaking engagement and being in an environment that I've never been in before and learning about some of the logistics while I'm there on the ground. Like, you got to be prepared for stuff like that. One of the things that I like about working within the sphere of documentaries. So the Enslaved docuseries was a documentary. That's different than acting. That's different than being on a television series where you have lines that you have to memorize and read. When things have a documentary format, it's extemporaneous. You have to be there, present, and in the moment. So you really get an opportunity to show and prove what you're made of. And I like that. I like working in those type of environments in terms of the documentary genre, because it's not made up. It's not rehearsed. It is what it is. So logistically, when I was brought into that Enslaved docuseries, that's also one thing about filming and cinematography, that there's a lot of moving parts to it. In the production, there's a lot of moving parts to it, because there are certain things that you literally have no control over. You really don't have no control personally over the weather. Or if you have certain people or even animals or younger people that are involved in the filming, a lot of times they're wild cards because they have less control over what's going to happen at that particular moment. So a lot of times it's looked at as very difficult to film younger people, children, or animals and stuff, because there's so much of a wild card. You never know what you're going to catch on film. So with the Enslaved docuseries, the production company, they first informed me that we were going to be doing filming here in the area where I live at in West New York, because they were researching a ship called the Home, and they initially were under the impression that the ship docked off of Lake Erie. But then when they did further research, they realized that it didn't, that it was actually in Lake Michigan. So I'm talking 2 weeks before us filming my particular segment in episode 5, I'm under the impression that I'm going to be filming in this area. A week into that, they contact me and say, yo, can you fly out? Because we're going to have to do this filming in another location. Now, mind you, I'm teaching preschool at this time. So I'm teaching 5 days a week. I'm doing the lesson plans and the curriculum. I'm doing everything myself with my preschoolers. And this is towards the end of the year. So we're also practicing for our end of the year graduation celebration. So I'm teaching class. We're using some of the time period to practice for graduation. And I'm also in constant correspondence with the production company about filming. So I'm like, oh man. And then I find out at the same time that the week that we're going to be filming is the week on that Friday is when we have our actual graduation celebration for my preschoolers. So I got all of these things going on at the same time. And I find out that we're going to be filming in a place called Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So I was given flight arrangements and a plane ticket to fly out the day after school. So right after my class, I had to head straight to the airport. So I had to pack my stuff before school. And right when school ended, I had to get directly to the airport and fly out from Buffalo, New York. So I flew out that night, that evening, and I arrived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin later on that evening. And I had to get picked up at the airport and driven in a car all the way to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where I checked into a resort hotel out there. So I ended up getting there like maybe midnight or something like that, and I had to be up at 5:30 for breakfast to meet the team, because at 5:30 we were gonna eat breakfast and meet briefly, because we had to be out on a dive boat at 6 a.m. So we had to be out on the dive boat at 6 a.m. I'm meeting the team, the film team, at the first time in my life. I'm in Sheboygan for the first time in my life. So I'm learning the environment. I'm meeting the team. And then once I got on the dive boat at 6 a.m., we traveled about an hour and a half out into the middle of Lake Michigan, because I was with a team of black scuba divers who also had a background in archaeological studies. And they were going to be diving 170 feet into the middle of the Lake Michigan in order to research the remnants of the Home, a ship that was there that was associated with the Underground Railroad. So imagine that I'm doing all of this, and I get on the dive boat, and some of the crew offer me this gum, and they're like, yo, you want this gum? It helps with like seasickness and stuff. And they're kind of offering it like this. And I'm thinking that they trying to prank me. So I'm like, nah, I'm good. You know what I'm saying? I'm good. And they're like, yo, you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So we get out there on the boat, and the boat is going like 40 minutes into the boat ride. The boat is rocking like this, and my stomach doing the same damn thing. I'm like, oh my God, I feel sick. Like I literally feel like I got to throw up. I got to use the bathroom, and I'm getting up and I'm striving to ask like some of the crew members, like, yo, I need to use the bathroom. And right when I start feeling like I got to throw up and I got to use the bathroom, the director gets a couple of his film crew members, and they're already filming on top of the dive boat, doing like drone footage and stuff. And they also have some people in the water that's filming the dive of the scuba divers and stuff, and they're down there and they're doing all of that. The director's like, okay, we're gonna start filming. And I'm like, yo, oh my God, like I really had to get myself together, because I was about to throw up on film. And the director basically allows you to do your own thing, in terms of me being a subject matter expert on why I was even brought into the film project, and gives you a little bit of an overview of some of the points that he wants you to talk about or discuss. But it ain't no written script. Okay, you need to say this and memorize this. Nah, it's this on you. Let's roll. So one of the things that happened is I was working with a guy who was a historian at a museum out of Detroit that focuses on maritime history, the study of various different boats and things. And I'm on the dive boat, And he whips out some information about my third great grandfather's journey through the Underground Railroad and the ship that he was actually on, the captain's name, information that I've looked for that I've never found. And he opened up a folder and handed it to me with all of this information about my family. And they're filming it right on spot. They're filming it in real time. So then they bring me up on the top of the dive boat, and we got our dive crew there, and we start filming me discussing with them the importance of this journey and its relationship to the Underground Railroad and things like that. All of that's in real time. Ain't no rehearsal, ain't no practice. Okay, let's practice first and then we're gonna film it. Nah, this is real time. And that's what I like about the documentary genre, that it's really about showing and proving what you're made of. I just recently, about a month or so ago, filmed a documentary, not a docuseries, but a documentary for the CBC network, which is a Canadian broadcasting network. And it was for the series The Nature of Things, which is the longest running series on Canadian television. It was started in the 60s by David Suzuki. So just last year, they were celebrating 60 years of being on TV. So they've been diversifying a lot of the hosts. So I had an opportunity to come in as a co-host on a documentary that they're doing about some of the Underground Railroad heritage right here in my city. So again, it was extemporaneous. It was on the spot. It wasn't no preparation. Oh, yo, you need to say this and say that. And this is what I want you to do now. We filming. This particular segment, I want you to discuss some things about your family, about your upbringing. I want you to discuss things about the importance of resistance in terms of movements of black people in this country. Like, I like that because it really shows and proves what you're made out of. Life itself functions in the same way. That's just an example of one of my experiences professionally. Life itself thwarts you into those type of experiences. It catapults you into those type of experiences where you really have to show and prove. You know, as a 5%, one of the exercises that we do is we build in ciphers. We engage one another on what's today's mathematics or what's today's degree, so that we're able to be extemporaneous. We're able to express ourselves at a moment's notice and reference certain things in life to give meaning to the moment. The same way that I'm building right now. Some people are just simply comfortable in those kind of spaces where they come together once a month around people for parliament or for rallies. And they're good in that close-knit circle or environment expressing themselves. There are many of us that have elevated into other different areas of life, but we're not just building in those particular close-knit ciphers. We're building in various different ciphers of life, whether that's a classroom or a boardroom, whether that's a construction site, or whether that is a back house film production of a docuseries or a television program, where we're still manifesting who and what we are and maintaining our connectedness to our cultural integrity, but it's just beyond the blocks. So mountains like this, whether we see certain things as a Mount Everest, mountains by nature grow in straight lines. So we always are going to go through those processes where we reach precipices, where we're forced to look at the escarpment or that steep cliff in terms of our elevation in life. In the Bible, it talks about in the beginning was a word, and the word was with God, and the word was God, and the word became flesh. So words are the source or the essence of manifestation. The mind manifests matter, and that mind is expressed through the mouth. So be careful and conscious and cautious about what you say you are and what you have the capability of doing. Last school year, I was teaching my class. We were going over solving parallelograms and the areas of certain objects. And I'm working it out on the board, and I'm getting some of my class to engage and to offer their input and to come up and to demonstrate their ability to do it on the chalkboard, the whiteboard. And there's some class members that's just sitting there like this. And I'm asking them questions like, are you understanding what it is that we're doing? Do you get what we're doing? And some of them, you could look in their face and tell that they don't know what the hell is going on, but they still like this. So they didn't expect me to call on them. So I said, okay, here. And I give them the dry erase marker. Like, okay, come up here and solve this problem. Oh, no. I said, nah, you said that you know what's going on. Don't write a check with your mouth that your ass can't cash. Don't say you're capable and qualified of doing something that you know deep down in your heart that you don't feel confident, comfortable, and qualified to do. Don't do that. Because the same way I'm calling you out to show and prove it, life itself is going to do that. There's no problem with saying that you don't know, or that you need more assistance, or can you break this down for me, or I don't fully understand it. There's nothing wrong with that. But many of us have this egotistical attitude where we're uncomfortable and afraid to be able to do that. So when I said mountains grow in a straight line, is what I was saying is you don't see a single mountain on a plain. So if you see like an open plains, there's not a single mountain. Singular. Mountains grow in lines. So you see different elevations. If you see Mount Everest isn't just sitting alone. There are other mountains that are next to Mount Everest, but a lot of times people don't talk about them because they don't demonstrate the majesty, or they don't demonstrate the level of elevation that people oftentimes aspire to when you look at Mount Everest. But there are other different levels or degrees that people have to go through in order to get to the peak of Mount Everest, because all mountains grow in a straight line like that. So even if you're looking at Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Vesuvius or any of these various different mountains, you see other mountains besides them. Life function in the same way. So if we have a certain goal and we look at that as the apex of our goals or the peak of where we want to go, you're going to have to go through various different other elevations and experiences in order for you to reach that. So hills can be singular. I'm not saying that they're all singular. Especially a man-made hill can be singular. So mountains aren't singular. Yeah, they're plural. So with any form of elevation, there requires a degree of acclimation. If your desire is to be a mountain climber, you have to learn to acclimate yourself to the atmospheric pressure, the terrain, and other different elements before you can get to the peak of what that mountain is. So you have to invest a certain amount of time to acclimate yourself to that terrain, to the atmospheric pressure, to the elements and the other things in that environment before you take the next step. When you see people who are successful in any area of life, they explain that through their life experiences. Before they were the CEO of this Fortune 500 company or something, they'll tell you about the job where they worked as a clerk, or how they worked here and how they took various different journeys or experiences in order for them to arrive at where they are at that particular point in their life. All of us go through that. And through all of those experiences and journeys, you reach points of demarcation. Now, what is a demarcated point? It's a point in your journey which distinguishes one place from the next. It's like a number on a clock. You have different hours that are demarcated or that designate the difference from one time period to the next. Our life goes through the exact same processes. The challenge is sometimes people may not be aware or conscious of those particular demarcated points. Sometimes those demarcated points are traumatic, and people can clearly tell you when they stop drinking because they had an experience associated with that particular event. They can tell you when they put down drugs. They can tell you when they gave up on relationships. All of those particular points, but there's a lot of other points in our life and in our journey that are demarcations or are events of recognition of our journey in life that a lot of times we may overlook or take for granted. So let me give you an example. In second grade, I was asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I told the teacher I wanted to be a zoologist. So I always grew up studying life around me. Whether that was animals, insects, plant life, I was always orientated in that kind of way. Also in second grade, I helped publish my first book with a couple of my classmates called The Runaway Pizza. It was based upon the book The Gingerbread Man, but it was called The Runaway Pizza. I did that in second grade. I've always read books that my mother had in her personal library, as well as books that my grandmother had. By the time I reached middle school, I was the person that some of my peers would get to write love letters so that they can give them to girls in order to get girlfriends. I was a designated love letter writer in middle school. That is also when I got introduced to Edgar Allan Poe in middle school when I was in 8th grade. So I can look at certain points of my journey and see how I became a writer or a public speaker. When I was 12 years old, my mother gave me a button with a man sitting on a rock, just looking, thinking. And I asked her, what was that? And she said, well, this sculpture is called The Thinker. And you're my thinking child. That's who you are. My mother identified that in me when I was 12 years old. So a lot of the different things that I do today is not mysterious. Me doing some inventory and reflection upon my life journey up into this point has given me insight into some of those different events and experiences that I've had that were indicators of what I would ultimately evolve into and continue to evolve into. But it required that level of insight and inventory for me to look at those different demarcations in my path, those events that were a part of shaping my consciousness and directing my trajectory in life. So Mount Everest is 29,141 feet high, which is about 5.5 miles. One of the things that we talk about in our lessons, in our build degree in particular, our 8th degree, is how when it comes to the process of precipitation, evaporation, and condensation, and all of those various different things when it relates to the water cycle, is that this water is never drawn above 6 miles from the Earth's surface by the sun and the moon. And the reason that it rains back onto our planet is because this water cannot get out of Earth's atmosphere with its high speed of rotating. It makes it impossible. So when you look outside at the clouds, they're about 6 miles above the Earth's surface. It's a very different perspective of the planet from 6 miles above. So this water is never drawn above that height. It's actually drawn above in a fine mist that the naked eye can hardly detect. That mist is or can be synonymous with mind or mentality or consciousness. because it is also intangible intelligence. When we're striving to elevate or think beyond and above where we're at in life, we get to a certain point where now our thoughts or our ideas begin to combine with other different thoughts and ideas, where then they become heavier than the gravitational pull of that determination to begin with. So the same way when you look at the water cycle, this fine mist is drawn up into the Earth's atmosphere, and then it becomes too heavy and distills back into the form. A lot of times that is what people go through when they're not able to consciously or use their mentality or have the mental toughness to persevere through those life experiences, and they distill back in the form or back in that state where they're comfortable. For example, like meeting your educator in knowledge in 120. Whether we're talking about that or a person learning about other different cultures or metaphysical systems, or learning about different religions, or taking certain classes, or enrolling in seminary school, or going to college. Some people persevere and they have the mental toughness in order to go through that experience. Some people distill back in the form. The same way in the water cycle, that fine mist is drawn up into the Earth's atmosphere and it distills right back into form. Depending upon what mist or current of air that water is in, it can become snow or hail, or rain. Those different forms are also synonymous with different emotions, or what some people feel once they're going through a life experience or they're setting out to reach a goal and they don't reach those goals, or they don't persevere, and they distill right back into form. Sometimes people beat themselves up about it and they're angry about it. That's like hell. Sometimes it's like snow. They're indifferent about it. I don't really care. I ain't really want to go to college anyway. I really didn't want to enroll in seminary school anyway. I didn't want a knowledge 120 anyway. It's indifference. That's what cold represents, or snow. Sometimes it's rain. Sometimes people are very hurt and they cry about that. Whatever it is, however you distill, there's also an opportunity for that water cycle to exist again. There's always another opportunity for you to draw that up into the fine mist and not distill in that form, or not to allow other different influences to disrupt what it is you're striving to do. So what do I mean by that? When this mist ascends into the atmosphere, it combines with other forms of mist in different currents of the atmosphere. So in other words, you may have a determined idea of what you want to do, and now you start sharing that conversation with other people, and they're sharing other different type of ideas. Sometimes the ideas that they share with you are ideas that don't contribute to your advancement or your elevation. Sometimes those ideas are doubt, insecurity, other forms of negativity. And now when you have your determined idea combined with those other different ideas, or that mist combines with other different forms of mist of the different current of the atmosphere, then you start to distill. Then you start, oh man, maybe I can't do it. Maybe I shouldn't do this. That's why you don't share your ideas with everybody. That's not going to contribute to you being successful in that undertaking. That's the exact reason why, if you're striving to be a mountain climber, or if you're striving to elevate in your life and you need a crew with you, you got to make sure that your crew is aligned with that determined idea, and that they're there to support you the same way that you're going to reciprocate that support for them. So in other words, mountain climbers usually don't just do it alone. They have a team with them. Anytime you're hiking, it's encouraged that you don't do it alone, because you need that support. It's the same way with any kind of determined ideas that you're striving to make manifest. It's important to have a team. People that can support you, and you reciprocate that support for them as well. So I just wanted to come on for a minute. I had some of these thoughts on my mind in terms of just building about Mount Everest and some of the different elements or qualities associated with mountain climbing, and how that is also synonymous with different ways in which we strive to elevate in life, and that there are certain things that are required of us in order to elevate, and to be prepared for the descent when it's necessary. Because one of the beautiful things about people who have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest or Mount Vesuvius or any of these other different landscapes is that they're now equipped to educate others on the pros and the cons and the worst parts and the best parts and the poor parts of that life experience. They're qualified now. If you're striving to climb Mount Everest, again, which is 29,141 feet high, there are certain places that you have to camp out at for a number of days in order to acclimate yourself to the atmospheric pressure, the elements, as well as the terrain. A person who has already done it, they can inform you on best practices when it's time for you to camp out, what you need to take with you along your journey, what you need to leave behind, the type of people that you need to have in your camp. They can school you on all of that because they've been there. And that's the importance of a benefactor, an enlightener, an educator. That's a temporary position for a person that can help walk you through or help see you through the process, where you likewise become a benefactor of others, an enlightener and an educator of others. So I will, this was inspiring, it was empowering, it was educational, and just gave those of you some insight into that specific degree in 120 in regards to Mount Everest being 29,141 feet high, and just the whole idea of elevation. Elevation always requires acclimation. And if you don't invest in or study the requirements for acclimation with anything you're striving to elevate in, it can be disastrous for you. It can be disastrous. So, peace. I appreciate y'all tuning in, and have a great day.